walks in integrity walks securely, but he who perverts his ways will be found out. He who winks the eye causes trouble, but a babbling fool will be ruined. The mouth of the righteous is a fountain of life, but the mouth of the wicked conceals a guile. Hatred stirs up strife, but love covers all transgressions. On the lips of the discerning wisdom is found, but a rod is for the back of him who lacks understanding. Wise men store up knowledge, but with the mouth of foolish ruin is at hand. The rich man's wealth is his fortress, the ruin of the poor is the wages of the righteous is life, the income of the wicked, punishment.
He who keeps instruction is in the way of life, but he who refuses reproof goes astray. Whoever hides hatred has lying lips, and whoever spreads slander is a fool. In the multitude of words, sin is not lacking, but he who restrains his lips is wise. The tongue of the righteous is choice silver, the heart of the wicked is worth little. The lips of the righteous feed many, but fools die for the lack of wisdom. The blessing of the Lord makes one rich, and he adds no sorrow with it. To do evil is like sport to a fool, but a man of understanding has wisdom. The fear of the wicked will come upon him, and the desire of the righteous will be granted. When the whirlwind passes by, the wicked is no more, but the righteous has an everlasting foundation. As vinegar to the teeth and smoke to the eyes, so is the sluggard to those who send him. The fear of the Lord prolongs days, but the years of the wicked will be shortened. The hope of the righteous will be gladness, but the expectation of the wicked will perish. The way of the Lord is strength for the upright, but destruction will come to the workers of iniquity. The righteous will never be removed, but the wicked will not inhabit the earth. The mouth of the righteous brings forth wisdom, but the perverse tongue will be cut out. The lips of the righteous know what is acceptable, but the mouth of the wicked what is perverse.
All right. So, in the introduction to this lesson, it says, with this lesson we begin the second section of the book that covers 10:1 through 22:16. And this section consists of miscellaneous proverbs of Solomon, with each verse containing a complete proverb, mostly containing two members. In this section, the happier aspects of life predominate. Prosperity seems to prevail and virtue is rewarded. Many of these proverbs warn against the wrong use of the tongue. There's definitely, no matter what time in history we're living in, I think it's always going to be true that it's going to be wise to bridle the tongue. That is just something that is has gone on through generations, and it seems like we have trouble with that over and over again as human beings. And wisdom is, in many cases, to just be quiet and not let everything out of your head that you're thinking. We've all been there. So in question number 1, what contrast is made between a wise and a foolish son?
A wise son makes a glad father, but a foolish son is a grief to his mother.
Yeah. You know what this makes me think of? If any of you have, in raising your children, have had a child act up and turn to your wife and say, "That's your child." And I'm not going to claim that one right now. We do that in jest sometimes, but is that what this really means here? That if the child is bad, it's the mother's fault, but when they do good things, it's all upon the father? No, but the idea that we can see is that if we are those that raise our children, not to be foolish, but to raise them in the care and admonition of the Lord in wisdom that comes from understanding the Word, then we're going to have gladness in that. I've seen it, not to brag on my children too much, but I've seen it, and I've seen them see things in this world because they have, since they've been born, Angela and I have been members of the church and faithfully attending with the saints, and they have not known anything else in their life. And when they see the dissipation of the world, oftentimes they just look at us like, what are they doing? Like, why would anybody do that? Don't they know that that's wrong? You know, and so you can see the wisdom that is being implanted, not trying to take credit. It's give God the glory. You know, it's His Word that has done that, and we can see that in our own lives as we've deposited and allowed the Word to be deposited into our hearts. We can see how we change our outlook and our view on what is good and bad. And you know, think of if you can think of in your recollection, think of a child, of maybe someone that you know, or think of a young person that went astray, and what did it cause for their parents? Grief is a good word. You know, having to go to the police station at 2:00 in the morning to bail the wayward child out of jail, or to clean up the mess after something has been done by that child. It brings grief, not gladness. You know, when we attain, if we live to be a ripe old age, and our children are there with us, we want it to be a gladness, a thing of gladness, that we have them with us and they can be helpful, and not a grief. And it's something to think about as we have opportunity with young people. Any other thoughts?
This passage doesn't really give mention that having children grow up in the admonition to go after the Lord and stuff also assumes that the parents have a solid foundation, right? So in today's society, as you were saying, you know, it brings grief to the parents. Well, a lot of times, and I mean, I don't know the exact numbers, but I think I've heard that we're now over 70% of marriages are divorces, right? So does it bring grief to them, or are they focused on other things?
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to have a solid foundation to help them build theirs.
Yeah, and I think often, as you know, I started out in jest in pointing out, sometimes you hear, well, that's your child. I think oftentimes that's what it ends up being. You know, that, well, they spent most of their time with this parent or that parent, and I didn't have anything to do with that. And people wash their hands of it, and it's a sad thing, because the Lord designed the home specifically to have a mother and a father, and they have their purpose. If you're in a home with a mother and a father, there's differences in the way that mothers and fathers handle things, and I, for one, am thankful that Angela is there by my side when some of the things need to be handled, because she does a better, more calm job than I do in some situations. You know, the dads usually are the jump in and let's fix it now people, and I'm guilty of that. So you know, there's it goes on both the father and the mother, and we need to make sure, if we want our children to be wise, if we don't want our children to be foolish, then yeah, you're exactly right. It puts it squarely on the shoulders of the parents.
40, maybe even 50 years ago. And I don't know if it's because of the information highways that we have now or not, but it was unheard of. It wasn't even spoken of as far as divorce goes.
Mm-hmm.
It was put off to the side. It was hushed. You did not talk about a divorce in your family.
Right.
Now it just seems like, oh, well, my daughter's been divorced 5 times. She's working on her 6th.
Yeah. You know, I was filling out a form for one of the kids to go to it might have been Anderson, to go to space camp. I can't remember, but it was on the form they actually had to put on there, parents' names and phone numbers, and whether or not the parents live together. It's on the form, and then there was a place to put people that cannot have contact with your child. If this person calls, can we give them information? So you could ban people. And I can only imagine that it has a direct connection to that other question up there about are the parents together. And it's a sad thing. It's a sad thing that's what is the norm now. And to bring about, this idea of a wise son and a foolish son, that used to be a thing in most cultures. That if the children acted awry, or even as a young adult, if you did something that you weren't supposed to do, it was a reflection back to the family. There was that shame that was there, and you'd hear things like don't shame your family in doing these things, and that had its place. Shame. To be honest, if nothing is shameful, then
the family
what's off the
name used to be one of the most important things in your life.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't seem like it anymore.
Right.
So here's some statistics, of course, from our lovely internet. But out of 1,000 people, the average marriage is 6.1 people will get married. Of that, 2.7 will get divorced. So that gives us a 44.2%.
Yeah.
It goes on to explain that doesn't take into account those that are together that aren't married. That doesn't take into account previous. That is just of current. So
Yeah.
you may have been divorced and remarried multiple times. Your number is only there once. So that's still a lot. Like I said, I think I've heard that it was well over 50 to 70% is where we were currently at.
I've not too long ago heard that the number was over 50% of marriages end in divorce.
But, it's hard to understand. In the world of information, it still comes down to the factors that you cannot change.
Yeah.
Ultimately, each of us are responsible for our own fate.
Yeah.
We can lead the horse to water. We can't make them drink.
Right. Let's read the other verses that they list here. Chapter 15, verse 20 of Proverbs. A wise son makes a father glad, but a foolish man despises his mother. And then chapter 17, at verse 21, says, he who begets a scoffer does so to his sorrow, and the father of a fool has no joy. And then at verse 25, same chapter, a foolish son is a grief to his father, and bitterness to her who bore him. And then going forward to chapter 29, at verse 15. (29:15) says, the rod and rebuke give wisdom, but a child left to himself brings shame to his mother. And so there we, to the point that you made a few moments ago, that, it really, this thing kind of really comes back around to the parent. And that is something that is lost in the world today. In fact, so many people, especially in our country, want the schools to take care of the children and to do the rebuking. And we see what kind of mess that's brought about. So that's not the way to go. Question number 2, contrast the one that is diligent and the one who deals with a slack hand. So what is the contrast there? What are those two things going on?
Rich and poor.
Rich and poor? Yeah. So in I better go back to the reading here. He who has a slack hand becomes poor, but the hand of the diligent makes rich. Yep, absolutely. And what is the slack hand?
Lazy.
Yeah, yeah. You remember in one of the movies from the '80s, the principal in the school called everybody a slacker. That's not really a word that we see or hear much anymore, but there it is. And number 3, what contrast is made between one who sleeps through the harvest and one who gathers?
The one that sleeps causes shame, and the one that gathers is a wise son.
Yeah, yeah. There's a time for everything. We know, we understand that. There's a time where we must work, we must do things, and it's wise to do so. If we don't prepare, then we're going to have a rough time. It's going to bring us shame.
This is like such a huge verse in meaning, and you can easily do a whole sermon on it because it can mean a lot of things. But as of right now, one of the bigger movements is this is your YOLO movement. I live for now. I don't plan for tomorrow. That's what this is about. That's the importance of knowing that tomorrow can only come if you plan for it. Otherwise, you will be left without. And that people who live for now and do not plan for tomorrow have nothing.
Yeah, I need a definition of YOLO.
You only live once.
Okay.
There's the whole on the. It's a wristband, but the idea of you only live once, so I do it now.
Okay.
Or if I'm doing something wrong, so I'm sinning, I'm drinking. Well, you only live once. If I want to do X, Y, or Z thing that's bad, you only live once. But they don't realize that this is the testament to your life eternally.
Yeah.
So you live once for that moment, you may pay eternal.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's we are so caught up in an experience. We will pay good money, and oftentimes to have an experience, to experience something, and that you only live once kind of idea. I was just telling someone the other day that I would probably pay more than I should admit to drink Kopi Luwak coffee, because I like coffee, and I want to try that. That's on my bucket list. What's that?
And you would definitely gain.
Right. Maybe Mike will go with me.
Yeah.
But there's those things that we work things up in our mind. Going to Disney for one thing is one of those things that people work up in their mind as an experience, and they have to do this before they die. I was at Disney; it didn't change my life, But there's those things that people build up in their minds, and they make them so important that it overshadows the importance of living a godly life.
That's what the mega churches are doing.
Mm-hmm.
They're making it an experience. At that point, it's not about God. You're just being entertained.
Right.
For those of you guys that don't know, or if you've been in the Canton area, just north of Canton on 77 North, there's this giant church where the Hoover Company used to be, I believe.
Yeah.
And it is mega.
Mm-hmm.
And so you go in there, and I have not been in there, but I'm told the hallways split. And on this wing is a church that believes this, and on this wing is a church that believes that. And, if you're bi or lesbian, you want to take that one.
Interesting.
But that's what makes the mega church. It's not all one cathedral. And a lot of people think it's one, but it's not.
I have not heard that.
At different times, that's what makes that mega church. But they're appealing to the entertainment world, right?
It'd be all things to all people.
It's all things to all people.
Yeah.
And they think that coming together under that Church United, that is not what Church United means at all.
That whole unity movement, of course, we're called to be united, but it's in Christ. It's not in our own desires. Yeah, absolutely. All right. So, number 4, what two things are contrasted to the violence that covereth the mouth of the wicked?
The blessings are on the head of the righteous, and the mouth of the wicked conceals violence.
All right. Yeah, and we can see that. We can see that. You know, what do those things that think of the figures in history that have been wicked in action, and what was it that eventually came out?
Death.
Violence. Yeah, violence and physical death. Absolutely. When you think of, and it's how did yours put that? Concealed.
Conceals violence.
Yeah, the mouth of the wicked conceals violence. Yeah, and that, what doesn't that just paint you a picture in your mind of all those wicked things that have happened in the past on this earth? And it started out with somebody telling you, no, that's not what we're going to do. And then eventually the violence came out because there was wickedness behind the actions. And if we are wise in the scriptures, we can find these things out. We can figure out when there's wickedness at work. There will be tells. What contrast, number 5, what contrast is made between love and hatred?
Verse 12 says, hatred stirs up strife, but love covers all sin.
Yeah. It reminded me of 1 Peter. If we go over to 1 Peter. 1 Peter 4 at verse 8 says, and above all things, have fervent love for one another, for love will cover a multitude of sins. And right there, you know, we have that same message being spoken many years after the Proverbs. And, you know, hatred does bring forth strife. It really does. When we see, again, the hatred and the wickedness around us in mankind and throughout history, it's caused strife. It's never caused good things. And we can see that from the 1,000-mile view. Hopefully, when these things come before our face in our lifetimes, we can take the examples that have been left for us. We can take the wisdom that we have in the scriptures and apply it and not fall victim. Number 6, what contrast is drawn between the wise man that lays up knowledge and the mouth of the foolish?
A wise man stores up the knowledge and guards his mouth guards his mouth to keep his soul from trouble. And the foolish man, he's near destruction, and his mouth is the snare of his soul.
Yeah. Yeah. It's we've all gotten ourselves in trouble with our mouths, and that last statement there of it being the snare, you know, it really is. Sometimes it's a trap. Sometimes our mouth can be a trap, and we need to take that wisdom and deposit it in our minds, in our hearts. The other verses they're given to take a look at are chapter 18 of verse 7 in Proverbs, and that says, a fool's mouth is his destruction, and his lips are the snare of his soul. And then if we go to 21, at verse 23, whoever guards his mouth and tongue keeps his soul from troubles. And I can't tell you how many times I've had to tell myself this and learn this lesson in life over and over again, but I've tried to instill that in my children. I've had that discussion many times with my children. Sometimes you should just stop talking, and then remind them again. Sometimes you should stop talking. Just stop. And that is that is something that comes again and again in our lives, and we've all, I'm sure, been there. But we need to be careful about the things that come out of our mouths, because the next question here deals with what eventually, if we don't guard our hearts, if we don't control our mouth, then the next thing happens. What is said concerning one who cherishes hatred? What do their lips do?
Lying lips.
Yeah, they're lying lips. And before you know it, if you just let everything fall out of your mouth and you just talk and you just keep talking, before you know it, you're going to say something, and then pride's going to get in there and tell you, oops, that's not, you shouldn't have said that, that's not right, but you can't go turn back now, and so you say more things, and you dig yourself a deeper hole. What's that?
I like verse 19 in the New American Standard. It says, when there are many words, transgression is unavoidable, but he who restrains his lips is wise.
Yeah. Mine says, in the multitude of words, sin is not lacking. Yeah. And that says a lot. You know, when you see in the world around us, a lot of things are said. A lot of things are said, and not near all of them are true.
And you just keep digging that hole deeper and deeper and deeper.
Yeah. Yep. And when we've all been there, and hopefully we avoid it in the future.
But it's on the internet. It must be true.
Right. Right. And that's the thing that you stand back and you learn to recognize, and you learn to watch. And usually the people that aren't out there fighting to tell you every little thing are probably telling you the truth. The ones that say the least. You know, the quiet, collected thoughts that come out as needed, rather than the ones that just fall out. And that's there's again great wisdom there.
Apply that to the Lord's church. Those who believe the Bible and live by it, the Lord's church, like here, are one in few of many churches.
And the actions speak louder than the words. You know, it's we should have words coming out of our mouth, the words of truth, the things that the Lord would have us to know and understand and to share, because the word is powerful. But sometimes, if we have an agenda, and I think this is what you're getting at there, that if you have an agenda, and a lot of the religious world does, because they have an agenda to cover up and make allowable the sins that they desire, and they have to talk an awful lot to rationalize those things, to bring those things into a place where they can be stomached, because you just can't find those sins in the scriptures, or at least the acceptance of them in the scriptures.
You have to remember we're in the world, and we don't have to be of the world.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you are, absolutely, and if you are a child of the Lord, you are not of the world. And yeah, those things that are clearly of the world should make us sick to our stomach. It should bother us. It should cause us to lose a little sleep. You know, when we see the things going on in the world and our friends and our family, it should bother us enough to agitate us into action. Were you going to say something?
Have you been watching any of this controversy about the genderisms? And they're interviewing all these people. They just talk out both sides of their mouth, and they're not saying a thing.
Yeah.
But they're trying to.
Right. There are many of those situations. You listen to somebody, and you come away with,
What'd
well,
they say?
What did they just say?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't understand a word you just said. Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
I always ask Jen.
We-
Right over my head. What did he say?
Yeah. Yep. In fact, on the way here, Angela was reading a news release, and it had some of that garbled New Age stuff in it, and we had to pick it apart on the way. We're like, well, this is what they're talking about, and to see the hypocrisy and everything, to the just not thinking their way out of the paper bag that they're in. They just can't seem to wrap their mind around what the truth is. They just keep talking in circles until it starts to make sense.
But they all get so excited, and they're just like, this is the thing to do, and this is why. And
Right.
But they didn't say anything.
The power of suggestion is
There you go.
it's very powerful to those that do not commit themselves to understanding the truth. If they're not looking for the truth, if they don't come to an understanding of truth, then they can be led in any direction, and it shows with our children. So many of those that fall victim to this idea of the multi-genders and the homosexuality and on all of those things. A lot of it comes because it's what everyone else is doing, and you can see it plain as day. But they can't see it because they're in the middle of it, and they have no lighthouse in the darkness, to tell them where the truth is. They don't have any steady example, and that again can bring us right back around to the family and the purpose that God instituted the family. And it's important for us to stand up against those things, to not let the truth be trampled upon, in so much as we can, in our little circle. So number 10, no, 9, no, 8. The righteous by their lips feed, teach, or nourish many. What is said concerning the fool?
He dies of lack of knowledge.
What does that remind you of? Any other passage in the scripture?
Hosea,
Yeah,
and people perish for a lack of knowledge.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's the knowledge is where we get the wisdom, the knowledge, the scriptures, the word. And then what kind of death are we speaking of here?
Spiritual.
It's a spiritual death. Yeah. Yeah, and people might look at that and try to apply it literally and say, well, I'm not going to die because I don't follow these things. Well, yeah, in the end you will. It's a spiritual death that we're speaking of here. It's the same as Adam and Eve were told that dying they will die. And it's much deeper than just our flesh and blood. So what is said to be as sport to a fool?
To do evil.
Yeah. We passed today. We almost thought we were going to get ourselves into a major traffic jam coming up the highway. There's a large venue along the way that hosts a big drunken concert series every year, and I'm going home a different way tonight. I promise you that I'm not going on those same roads. But the freeway was packed up for miles, people lining up to go into this place. And I have, in the past, with young students, I actually drove with a slew of students for a little while that would be attending that thing, and they would get involved in underage drinking, and the sheriff caught them and forced them to go to a rehab class. And I actually had to pick up a lot of my driving school students from rehab class because they had all gone to this thing, this venue, and this event. And it is like sport to those that don't know better. And then, to compound that, the parents that would actually allow their children to be in such a situation. But it is like sport. It's like a fun thing to get involved with such things. And we've all been there at different times in our lives. Again, saying these things, we're not trying to, we're not saying we're perfect. We're not saying that we've never done these things. But the Word of God is powerful, sharper than any two-edged sword, as we understand, and as we apply it to our hearts, we come to understand certain things. And we come to understand the folly of some of the things we've done in the past. We understand the folly of doing evil and how much fun we had in the past doing such things, and understand that we need to stay the course. With number 10, with what does the writer compare the duration of the wicked? Like a whirlwind. Those don't last very long. And on the other hand, what is said to be true concerning the righteous?
Everlasting foundation.
All right. Everlasting foundation. Number 11, the sluggard sent to do something is compared unto what? Irritating things.
Have you ever tried those?
Smoke in the eyes?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've had
Have
smoke
you
in
ever
my
had
eyes.
vinegar on the teeth?
Burns. I don't understand that one.
Oh, I do.
It's like, I can't even describe it. Try it sometime.
We just bought some vinegar today.
Yeah.
But I eat vinegar in my salad and everything.
Yeah.
I don't mind it. But I'll have,
But it's
You have
mixed
other
with
things
something.
with it. Just try it by itself.
okay, I will. I'll let you know Sunday.
You kind of clinch up,
Uh-huh.
and at the same time, when you get smoke in your eyes, what do? You immediately
Yeah.
close your eyes.
Yeah. Yep. We've had a lot of smoke in my eyes.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So what shall happen to the expectations of the wicked?
Will perish.
Yeah. And what of the righteous?
They have the hope of righteousness, and will be gladness.
All right. Hope of righteousness and gladness. And that is so true. If we run to those things as sport, to do evil things, we'll find ourselves, we will perish. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth, as we're told. But in the end, if we are righteous, if we are found righteous, there's gladness. And I don't know if any of us can properly wrap our mind around the idea of eternity. And if we can properly wrap our mind around the joy of the Lord. I mean, we can think we know it. We experience some joy in following after the Lord on earth. And we find that our life is, I have to say, I know my life is more joyful because of my hope in the Lord than it would be if I wasn't. I see it all around me. I see those, even friends of mine from years ago that don't have the hope of heaven after this life at this point in time, and have not sought out the truth of the Lord. And I see the despair and the trouble and the trials that they just have trouble dealing with. Some have taken their own lives in the past because of such the despair that they have been in. It's a sad thing. But the righteous truly do have that expectation that hope and gladness will result. What is said to be strength to the upright?
Way of the Lord.
Yeah. And what shall be destruction to the workers of iniquity?
The way of the Lord.
Yeah. Yeah. That took me a minute for my brain to get that at the end there. But it is. It's that double-edged sword, isn't it? It's that double-edged sword. That it's strength to the upright and it's destruction to the workers of iniquity. And how is that destruction going to come about? What is mankind judged by?
How many sins they do?
By the word, yeah. And by every word that proceeds out of your mouth, but the word is that standard by which all mankind will be judged. And in that way, be a strength to the upright that it's going to be a destruction to those that have spent their life in iniquity. So, all right. So next week is session 8. Thanks for your input. We'll go ahead and pause the sound anyway.
Didn't go all the way across.
Anyways, so the lesson today that I have, the invitation, is actually the the verse for today is going to be 3:5-8. James 3:5-8, not just 3:5-8. So if we turn there, that is Ecclesiastes. Okay, there we go. That's the right verse. So, for some backstory, we're actually going to go to James 3:1-4, so that we have some backstory, because backstory is very vitally important for understanding how things work. Because you can take a verse here and say, oh, look at this, see how this is, look at this, it's how this is saying, this is what it's saying. But without the backstory, without the context, you can make basically any verse that means the opposite say the otherwise. You could probably find a verse and without the backstory say that you're allowed to have a kitchen in the church. But then you go in like 6 verses back and it explains why that is not correct. So James 3:1 is, my brethren, let not many of you become teachers, knowing that we shall receive a stricter judgment. For we all stumble in many things. If anyone does not stumble in the word, he is a perfect man, able to bridle the whole body. Indeed, we put bits in horses' mouths, that they may obey us, and we turn their whole body. Look at ships, although they are so large and are driven by fierce winds, they are turned by a very small rudder, wherever the pilot desires. So, verse 1 is talking about how teachers have to be kind of careful with what they're saying, because if you are wrong in what you're teaching, then you're basically getting a stricter judgment, because you need to really understand what you're talking about, so you're not just screaming random things that could be incorrect. You should try your darndest to make sure everything's correct. And then moving on, it's in like 3-4, it's talking about how if you, like a horse bit is like that big, like as big as this pen, and it's able to turn and control a horse that could be bigger than some of the cars out there. And moving on, also cars, like the drive shaft that is like going down to the tires to turn them. Not the drive shaft, the steering column. Oops. But the steering column going down to the wheel axles to turn them to control the car. Or if you think about the plane, the rudder on the back of the car, not the car, English. Thank you. I'm being failed. I give up. But basically, the rudder on the back of the plane onto the back of the vertical stabilizer, that stabilizer is able to turn on the yaw motion of the aircraft. And that makes sense, because it's talking about how big things are easily controlled by something really small. Like a huge horse is controlled by a small bit, or a huge boat controlled by the fiercest of winds is able to be moved by a rudder that is like a quarter of the size of the boat. And then that is what we're getting from that, the fact that when you're thinking of it, all these huge things in the world that we have as reference are controlled by something so small and insignificant, but yet it is significant. Now moving on to the meat of the invitation, James 3:5-8. Verse 5 says, "Even so the tongue is a little member and boasts great things. See how great a forest a little fire kindles." How many forest fires have been started because somebody accidentally dropped a match into a small leaf pile, thinking, "Oh, it's not going to spread that far. Oh, great, now my house is burning down." It only the size of a match, which can get blown out by the wind. If it starts taking off them leaves and trees, then the entire forest is on fire now. And then verse 6, "And the tongue is a fire, a world of iniquity. The tongue is so set among our members that it defiles the whole body and sets on fire the course of nature, and it is set on fire by hell." So basically what we can take from that is the tongue is the same way as the bit, as the rudder on the plane and the rudder on the boat, as the same thing as the steering column. It's the same way. Even though your tongue is a pretty small part of your body, not the smallest part, but it is a pretty small part of your body, and yet it is able to do all this bad things, because you need to control your speech, because some of the evils of the tongue is basically like profane language, using inappropriate language, bringing people down. All these things are not good, and lying, as we see in verse 14, "But if you have bitter envy and self-seeking in your hearts, do not boast and lie against the truth." You can see that the tongue, being such a small part of the Bible, of your body, starts with a B, same thing, but being such a small part of your body, and yet it is able to send you to hell, essentially. Technically, the Lord is the one that sends you to hell, Jesus, but basically, the tongue is able to get you into sin. So, like it said back here in verse 2, "For we all stumble in many things. If anyone does not stumble in word, he is a perfect man, able also to bridle the whole body." So, what it's saying, if you understand it correctly, is that if you can control the tongue, if you can control your speech, if you can keep yourself from saying these profane, inappropriate words, or bringing people down instead of up, as we are supposed to, then you can control the entire body, essentially. Because yet, like in verse 8, it says, "But no man can tame the tongue. It is an unruly evil full of deadly poison." The tongue is very dangerous. As I am using it right now to speak the word, it is a very dangerous piece of your body that you should be careful of, because at any moment, that word could just slip, or your anger could just peak, and everything just comes out. You scream at somebody, bringing them down. You could say all these profane, inappropriate words without even meaning it. So if you're able to control basically your tongue, it says right there in verse 2 that you will be able to control the entire body. Not literally, but that's basically the equivalent. Because once you can, that's a lot of the things, that's a lot of issues that the tongue can cause that you can stop if you can control it and keep it at bay. all the quiet people don't really know what I'm talking about. they don't say anything for their tongue to defile them with. And then we can also see over here, but above all, verse 12, but above 5 verse 12, but above all, my brethren, do not swear either by heaven or by earth or with any other oath, but let your yes be yes and your no be no, lest you fall into judgment. All these things, swearing, saying bad things, bringing people down instead of up as we're supposed to, all these things are a deadly poison that comes from the tongue, or a fire that can, or the tongue being a fire that can kindle your entire body into torment because you couldn't keep control of your tongue. So that is the end of using verses, but that is not the end of the invitation because it needs to be longer because I say so. But continuing on to the bookmark, because that's what I always end off with, you have to hear, like in Romans 10:17 it says, and John 8:32, because you have to hear the word in order for any of the other steps to salvation to even take effect. Because if you don't hear it, how are you supposed to do what it says? And then you have to believe it, like in Hebrews 11:6 and Acts 16:31. Because again, you can't really do anything if you haven't heard the word to know what to do, and you won't do anything if you don't believe what it says. And then you have to repent, like in Luke 13:3 and Acts 17:30, where instead of the repentance thing is less of oh look, I stole the cookie from the cookie jar, you get caught because you forgot to wipe off the chocolate from your lip, and then it's like, oh, I'm so sorry, definitely not sorry. Like, you're not, it's like the kid's not sorry, he's just sorry that he was caught. So you don't want the repentance to be a sorry that I was caught. You want it to be a sorry that I did that. So instead of kind of just being like, I'm going to stay right here and I'm not going to go any further that way or any further that way because why? You want to make a full 180 and go that way, the way you're supposed to. And then moving on, we have confess. Matthew 10:32 and 1 John 4:15, which is confessing that Christ is the Son of God and that he is alive and that he basically confessing Christ. And then you have to be baptized because that is what we are commanded to do, like in Mark 16:16 or Acts 2:38. That's what it commands us to do. Because after all of this, you be baptized for the remission of your sins and raised up as a new creature. And then you have to remain faithful. Because everything you've done, if you've heard, believed, repented, confessed, and even been baptized, it all is useless if you don't remain faithful, as it says in Revelation 2:10 and Matthew 10:22. In fact, let's go to Revelation 2:10 to finish off the scriptures here. Everybody will be there before I am. I'm very slow at finding things. Probably should have had this bookmark, to be honest. That probably would have been a better idea. But, Revelation 2:10. Do not fear any of those things which you are about to suffer. Indeed, the devil is... Am I in the same...
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. I thought I was in the wrong place because I did not prepare correctly for this verse. About to suffer. Indeed, the devil is about to throw some of you into prison that you may be tested, and you will have tribulation 10 days before faithful. Be faithful until death, and I will give you the crown of life. That is basically what it's saying. So, remain faithful until death, because you can do all of the things here, but if you don't remain faithful until death, it's all useless. You can't just do everything that'd be like, okay, I'm fine, I can go do whatever I want now. You have to remain faithful, continue doing what the Lord says to make it to heaven, to receive the crown of life. If anyone here has not been baptized yet, which I am pretty sure everyone here has been baptized, you could come forward and do that. The waters are ready. But which will apply to everybody here, if you have any issues, like with your faith, like if your faith is wavering, like you're having some issues, you can come forward and let that be known so that we all can pray for you as we stand and sing.
327.
What will you do with Jesus? The question comes to you, and you must give